When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I didn't want her to see me fall apart. It was early evening. The sky outside had that strange orange color you see just before sunset, when light starts fading but hasn't completely gone. I was standing by the door, holding my small suitcase, the one I had used when I first came to this house as a bride decades ago. I never thought I'd use it again, not like this. She stood near the living room, her arms folded, her expression calm but firm. "Ma," she said quietly, "it would be better if you stayed with your sister for a while. We just need some space." Her words were soft, but they hit me harder than any scream ever could. Behind her stood my son, Arjun, my only child. The boy I had raised on my own after losing my husband. He didn't say a word. His eyes were fixed on the floor. I kept waiting for him to look at me, to say something, anything, but he didn't. I wanted to ask, "Do you agree with her?" But my throat felt dry, my voice trapped somewhere deep inside, so I simply said, "Take care of yourself, son," and I turned to leave. Outside, the wind had started to pick up. There was the faint smell of rain in the air, the kind of smell that reminds you of childhood, of monsoon mornings and steaming cups of chai. I stood there for a moment staring at the gate. My hands trembled as I lifted the latch. I looked back one last time. He was still standing there, half hidden behind her, his face pale, his eyes blank. I stepped out. The gate clicked shut behind me. The first few drops of rain fell as I began to walk. I didn't have an umbrella. My dupatta clung to my shoulders as the drizzle turned heavier. I walked slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The road was quiet. The world around me carried on. Cars passed, lights flickered on in nearby houses. Laughter came from somewhere far away, but in my world, everything had gone silent. When I reached the park at the corner, I sat down on a damp wooden bench. The streetlight above me flickered, throwing my shadow on the wet ground. I stared at it, a small shivering outline of myself. How did it come to this? I whispered. I had given my life to my son. Every dream, every wish, every bit of love. And now, here I was, alone, drenched, unwanted. I looked up at the sky. The rain felt colder now, but somehow it matched what I felt inside. Maybe this is what motherhood really is. Not just loving your children, but learning to let them go when they no longer need you, even when it breaks you. My name is Mira. I'm 58 years old. For most of my life, I was a school teacher in a small government school. I taught English and moral science, subjects that always made me believe that goodness and honesty would be enough to carry you through life. I was married young to Rajesh. He was kind, hardworking, and had the kind of laugh that filled a room. We didn't have much money, but we had peace. He used to say, "Mira, as long as we have each other, we'll be fine." And then one morning, he was gone. A heart attack. No warning, no time to say goodbye. I still remember standing in the hospital corridor, the white walls spinning around me, the sound of my son's crying echoing in my ears. Arjun was 14 then, tall for his age, quiet, serious. I remember holding him close and saying, "Don't worry, Beta. I'm here," and I kept that promise. I worked long hours, took on private tuitions in the evenings. I cooked simple meals, mended clothes, and saved every rupee I could. There were days when I'd go to bed without dinner, just so he could have enough. But he never made me feel small for it. He studied hard. He would come home, hug me, and say, "Ma, one day I'll make you proud." He did. When he got his first job at 22, he took me out for dinner, our first time at a restaurant. He smiled shyly and said, "From now on, you rest. I'll take care of you." That night, as I looked at him, I felt a strange peace. I thought, maybe life had been hard, but at least I had raised a good man. Years passed. He became successful. I grew older but happier. We were more like friends than mother and son. We watched movies together, teased each other about his messy room, and sometimes sat on the terrace just talking about life. Then one day, he told me about a girl named Priya. "She works with me," he said, smiling in that shy way he always did when nervous. "She's smart, kind. I think you'll like her." I did. The first time I met her, she came home with a box of sweets. She touched my feet and said, "Namaste, Auntie." She had beautiful eyes, sharp but gentle. Call me Ma, I said warmly. Your family now, she blushed and smiled. Their wedding was simple, a small ceremony with close family. I remember standing beside them as they took their vows, tears in my eyes, praying for their happiness. When they moved in with me, I told everyone, I have 2 children now. The first few months were wonderful. She helped around the house, laughed easily, and often asked me for recipes. In the evenings, the 3 of us would sit together, watching TV, sipping tea. But slowly, something changed. It started with silence. Small, unnoticeable at first, like the sound of a clock you only hear when the room grows still. She began closing the kitchen door when she cooked. She stopped joining me for evening tea. Arjun started spending more time in their room. When I spoke, she smiled politely, but her eyes avoided mine. I told myself it was normal. Newlyweds need their space. She just needed time, but the distance kept growing, quietly, steadily, like water seeping through a crack. One morning, I woke up early to make breakfast. I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Your mother keeps rearranging everything, Priya was saying. I can't find anything where I left it. Arjun's voice was low. She's just trying to help, Priya sighed. I'm not a child, Arjun. I know how to manage my kitchen. I froze. I stood there, holding the corner of the wall, unable to move. It was such a small thing. But it hurt. I went back to my room quietly. I didn't want to cause trouble. Later that day, I tried to talk to her. Priya, if I move something, I'm sorry. Old habits, you know? She smiled a little too tightly. It's okay, Ma, just maybe let me handle things my way? I nodded. Of course. But from that day, I stopped entering the kitchen. Slowly, my role in the house shrank. I no longer joined them for dinner. They started eating late after I went to bed. Arjun stopped telling me about work. Even the morning greetings became shorter, mechanical. Once I made biryani for them, Arjun's favorite. I waited all evening. When I called them, Priya said, "Oh, we already ordered food." We were craving pizza, I smiled, pretending not to mind. But when I went back to my room, I looked at the untouched dishes and felt tears sting my eyes. I thought love was enough to keep a family together. But sometimes love isn't loud enough to be heard. Days turned into months. Then came the afternoon when she said it, those words that changed everything. Ma, I think you should stay with your sister for a while. We just need space. Her voice was calm, her eyes steady. I looked at her for a long moment. Did I do something wrong? I asked softly. She looked away. No, it's just easier this way. When Arjun came home, I tried to talk to him. Son, do you want me to go? He looked tired. Ma, please don't make this harder. Priya feels uncomfortable. I just want peace. Peace. That word hurt more than any insult. I nodded. Of course, Beta. Whatever makes you happy. And that was the beginning of my leaving. I packed my things the next morning. Just a few clothes, my old shawl, a framed photo of Rajesh, and one of Arjun as a little boy. The one where he's holding a cricket bat, smiling without a single front tooth. Priya stood by the doorway. She didn't say much, only offered a polite, "Do you need help with your bags?" I shook my head. No, I'll manage. Arjun came out of the bedroom, still in his office clothes. He looked at me for a second, then looked away. You'll call when you reach? He asked. Yes, I said quietly. I wanted to hug him, to hold his face and say, I'm still your mother, but my body refused to move. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, thin, almost unreal. I could still smell Priya's perfume in the hallway. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. I didn't look back, because sometimes looking back hurts more than leaving. My sister Shanta lived 2 hours away, in a small town surrounded by fields. When I arrived, she hugged me tight. What happened, Mira? She asked softly. I forced a smile. Nothing. They just need some space. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. She didn't ask again. That's what sisters do. They know when not to press. Her house was smaller but warmer. The walls smelled of turmeric and soap, and her husband kept the radio on all day. For the first few days, the sound of laughter and village chatter kept me distracted, but at night, the quiet returned. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, remembering Arjun's childhood, the nights he'd fall asleep on my lap, the mornings he'd wake me with a kiss on the cheek, Now he was somewhere in the city, sleeping beside a woman who didn't want me near him. I tried to be strong. I told myself he'd call, that this was temporary, but weeks turned into months. Not a single call came. Sometimes I picked up the phone, stared at his number, and put it back down. I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to disturb their peace. Once I even dreamt of him standing by my bed, saying, "Ma, I'm sorry," when I woke up. The pillow was wet. One afternoon, Shanta came running into my room with her phone. "Look," she said, showing me a picture on social media. It was Arjun and Priya, smiling, standing in front of a waterfall. The caption said, "Vacation well deserved." My heart dropped. He hadn't told me, not even a message. I stared at the photo for a long time. They looked happy, glowing, and I looked small in my own memories. That day, I sat in the garden, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. I whispered, "Maybe he's moved on. Maybe I have to as well, but it's not easy to move on when your heart is still standing in the doorway of the house you built." Months later, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Arjun, it was from his company. A pension document I needed to sign. Seeing his name printed beside next of kin made my hands shake. That night, I opened my old photo album. Every page was a story: Arjun's first school uniform, his first birthday, his graduation photo with me standing beside him, proud and teary-eyed. I touched the pictures gently and whispered, "Where did I lose you, Beta?" And then one evening, after more than a year, the phone rang. It was his voice. "Ma?" I froze. "Arjun? How are you?" he asked quietly. His voice was unsure, hesitant, like a boy who had done something wrong and didn't know how to fix it. "I'm fine," I said. "Are you both okay?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Priya's pregnant." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My heart filled with warmth and pain all at once. "That's wonderful," I said softly. "Congratulations." "She's a little sensitive these days," he continued. "So she doesn't want too many people around after the baby. She wants privacy." "Of course," I whispered. "She should rest. Tell her I'm happy for her." We talked for 2 more minutes and about nothing, really. The weather, his work. Then he said, "I'll call again soon." He didn't. When the baby was born, I found out through a neighbor who showed me the photo online. My son, holding his newborn daughter, smiling wide. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, our little angel." I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. No one had told me, not even a message, not even a word. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. I wasn't crying because they forgot me. I cried because I had finally realized they didn't need me anymore. Time passed, 2 years to be exact. Life had become quiet, predictable. I taught neighborhood children in the evenings, tended to my sister's garden, and learned to live with the ache that sat silently in my chest. Then, one afternoon as I was hanging clothes outside, I heard Shanta calling from the living room. "Mira, it's Arjun!" I froze, the wet sari slipping from my hands. I ran inside, my heart pounding. He was on the phone. His voice was soft, tired. "Ma, can we come visit?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Of course," I said finally. "Of course, Beta." They arrived 2 days later. When I opened the gate, I saw Priya first. She looked thinner, her face pale. In her arms was a little girl, their daughter. She had Arjun's eyes, big, curious, and kind. "Namaste, Ma," Priya said quietly. I nodded, smiling faintly. "Come in." The child looked at me and smiled shyly. Then she reached out her small hands. Something inside me broke open, in the best way. I took her in my arms. She smelled of baby powder and warmth. We went inside. I made tea and simple food, dal, rice, and a little kheer. They ate quietly, like people who didn't know what to say. That night, after the baby fell asleep, Arjun came to my room. He stood by the doorway for a while, then said, "Ma, I'm sorry, I looked up." His eyes were wet. "I should have listened to you," he said. "I should have stood up for you. I don't know why I didn't. I thought keeping peace meant keeping quiet. But I hurt you instead. I didn't know what to say." I just reached out and touched his cheek. "You were young," I said softly. "You loved her. And sometimes love makes us blind. It's okay." He held my hand like he used to when he was small. "Can you forgive her?" he asked. I looked toward the door. Priya was standing there, silent, tears in her eyes. I saw in her face what I hadn't seen before: guilt, fear, and longing. I said quietly, "I already have." They stayed for a week. During that time, the house felt alive again. The baby filled the rooms with laughter. Priya began helping in the kitchen. One morning, she said, "Ma, can you show me how you make your kheer? Arjun says no one makes it like you." I smiled. "Of course." As we cooked together, she looked at me and said softly, "I was wrong, Ma. I thought having you around meant losing control of my home. I didn't realize you were only trying to love us." I nodded. "Sometimes we learn the hard way." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you for not hating me." I chuckled gently. "Hate is too heavy, Priya. It hurts the one who carries it." We didn't speak much after that, but something between us had changed. The wall had cracks now, and through them, warmth began to pass again. When they left, the little girl hugged me tightly. "Bye, Nani," she said in her small musical voice. "I'll come again." I smiled, tears glistening in my eyes. "I'll be waiting." As their car disappeared down the dusty road, I stood by the gate, the wind brushing against my face. For the first time in years, the ache inside me felt lighter. It's been many years since that day. Arjun and Priya visit often now. Their daughter Anaya is 7. Every time she runs into my arms shouting, "Nani!" it feels like a piece of my heart has been returned to me. Sometimes, she sits beside me while I sew or water the plants. "Tell me a story." "Nani," she says, and I do. Stories about her father, about love, about patience. One evening, she asked, "Nani, were you ever sad?" I smiled. "Yes, my dear. But sadness teaches us how strong we really are." She nodded solemnly, the way only children can, and hugged me tighter. I've learned something over these years. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others. It's a gift you give to yourself. It lets you breathe again. It lets you live again. If you're listening to this and your heart aches because someone you love has turned away, hold on. Time changes hearts. People realize, often too late, what love really means. Don't harden yourself. Stay kind. Stay open, because one day, they may find their way back to you. And when they do, you'll want to meet them with warmth, not bitterness. Love, when true, always finds its way home. And as for me, every evening, when the sun sets and the sky turns that soft orange again, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, close my eyes, and whisper a quiet prayer of thanks for the rain that once saw me broken, for the silence that taught me strength, and for the family that found its way back. Not perfect, not unscarred, but together, because in the end, that's all that matters.